Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Child Marriage Free World interview series. My name is Aicha with 100 Million US.
And I'm Esha with Child Marriage Free World. From December 2nd to the 8th, we're organizing a global pledging week to end child marriage, where students, individuals, and communities all over the world will be learning about their rights and making a personal declaration against child marriage.
We are hosting this series of interviews and conversations with activists and advocates and experts during Global Pledging Week to highlight some of the incredible work that has been done around the world. We're thrilled to have our next guests, Kate Ryan Brewer and Vilas Wright, today to talk to us. We're going to begin by playing the trailer for the documentary Knots, A Forced Marriage Story, which was directed by one of our guests, Kate.
I was picked up from high school at the age of 14 and married off to a 26-year-old man.
I had the handcuffs actually put on me to marry my rapist.
I was targeted as a vulnerable child and groomed. I suffered abuse, exploitation, entrapment, and manipulation.
Forced and child marriage is something people haven't talked about in the United States.
The concept of marriage, the concept that I was going to get married, was a conversation that we started to have right around the time I was maybe 11.
Where I was raised, I was groomed basically from infancy to become a wife and a mother.
My upbringing was very little interaction. Boys and men make a blessing every morning, thanking God for not making them a non-Jew or a slave or a woman. You're not going to find your own husband. The matchmaker is going to find you a match.
We were taught to kind of obey without questioning. My dad sat me down and told me that you're not allowed to have sex out of marriage. You're going to get married.
A forced marriage is one that takes place without the full and free consent of one or both parties. And it typically involves one or more elements of force or fraud or coercion.
As a young person, or even as a 25-year-old, if you've grown up in that same household and you don't have a lot of independence, those threats are incredibly powerful. They're often the ones that get people to give in.
To be told that really that's not what your heart's desire is and that you're just lying is crushing.
What we're talking about is forced consummation, which is rape. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people think about that when they think about forced marriage.
At any moment, someone can just barge in and take your body.
But when you're a kid and then you're forced into something, you don't know why it's wrong.
When he first threatened to kill me, he would describe to me in detail how he was going to kill me. And it was very graphic and very scary. And I said to him, I have tasted life without you, and it is sweet. You're not coming back. I filed for divorce soon thereafter.
We have to pass legislation in all 50 states.
We can do this by finally ending early forced child marriage, an unjust, unfair, and archaic practice that is severely affecting the very core of our nation, the children of America.
Child marriage is not just a problem that occurs in countries on the other side of the globe, but it happens right here in our own very backyard.
Wow, that was an incredibly powerful trailer and something that I think will be extremely applicable to our conversation today, while we'll be focusing on discussing child marriage in the US specifically. So before I get started with that whole discussion, I would love to have Kate. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us about your role and your experience working on child marriage issues?
Absolutely. My name is Kate Ryan Brewer, and I'm a filmmaker. And for a time, I was also working in communications at a nonprofit that addresses gender violence issues, a subject I'm very passionate about. And it was during that time that I learned that child marriage was still, and forced marriage were still such huge issues in the United States, which I had been unaware of prior to that point. And so yeah, my role started there. And then obviously through making the film, interacting with survivors, learning a whole lot more. And now I do all I can to advocate to end child marriage, both in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Kate. And now I'd like to turn it over to our next guest, Vilas. Could you please introduce yourself and also tell us about your role and experience working on child marriage issues?
Thank you for having us and doing this. I really appreciate the shedding of the light on this matter, which Aicha and I were discussing yesterday about how much the powers that be don't even know the laws. They don't even know their own. I'm active in the, I was, now it's put to the council to have a final vote to end child marriage in DC and make it 18 without exception. And I've been active in that. And as we met with council members, all of us were a little surprised to see how shocked they were that child marriage is allowed. And it was disturbing to me because the lawmakers don't even know the law. And so it's critical, unfortunately, that we have to go around state by state and shine a light on this and say, hey, you need to fix this on the books because there are children that are being allowed to be married off for whatever reason. I was married off by my mother at the age of 13. And it was as a result of being violently raped. And I say that because I couldn't hide it. Otherwise, I would have. And I was covered in bruises. And I wasn't able to hide the fact that I was now impure, spoiled. And so my mother decided to marry me off. And it shouldn't have been allowed. It needs to be completely ended. And a parent should not be able to consent to a child going into a contract that involves them being raped. I mean, why is an adult having sex with somebody under 18, why is that statutory rape? But if you marry off your underage child to an adult man, it's who's consenting? The child can't consent. The child is unable to consent. So the parent is signing away their child, and we need to end this. And it's also shocking that it's so hard. It should just be simple. Federal bill, let's go. No more child marriage for someone who doesn't have the full rights of an adult. If you want to say you can get married at 16, then you should also give them full rights. And they don't get that. It's assumed, oh, well, they're automatically emancipated, but they're not. You can't just walk out of that marriage and say, oh, I'm going to go file for divorce, because what attorney is going to enter into an agreement with a 17-year-old that wants to get a divorce? It's not that simple. It doesn't work.
Vilas, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being here with us and for the work that you're doing to advocate against child marriage in the United States. We know that it's a really difficult issue. And Kate, I want to turn to you really quickly. We often think about child marriage as a foreign country issue, something that happens outside of the United States. And as we know, however, like your documentary, Knots sheds light on the fact that child marriage does also occur in the United States. While making your film, what did you learn about child marriage in the United States?
Thank you for asking, and thank you for sharing. One of the things I learned was just how widespread it is. It is not contained to any particular community or specific religious group or ethnic group or socioeconomic group. It is incredibly widespread in the US. And when I started making the documentary in 2016, 2017, at that point, all 50 states allowed for child marriage. Now, things have fortunately been changing since then. I think a lot of us would argue that definitely not fast enough. But even since the film was released, We are currently standing at 13 states that have ended child marriage, but that also leaves the vast majority, 37 states, that haven't ended child marriage. And that also, it was just very little understood. Even, I think, the term child marriage or forced marriage, for some reason, by nature of the word marriage, it's as though that word is somehow on a pedestal in our society. So when you add that to it, you're not thinking of the human rights abuse that it is. And it is a designated human rights abuse by the US State Department. So the fact that we are allowing it across the United States is absolutely ludicrous, especially in this day and age. So when you replace that word marriage with what it actually is, child rape, child abuse, child control, child, all of the things that are actually contained within that, the reality that it is, I think people have a difficult time understanding that. And I think that's what makes it kind of a nuanced issue to address. It really shouldn't be that difficult to understand, but I think it takes an entry conversation to really get to the heart of what it is you're actually looking at.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you, Kate. When I first started with Child Marriage Free World and the 100 Million campaign, child marriage was not even something that I thought happened in the US because it's not even talked about. It's always talked about as if it's a foreign country problem, which is why what you just said about how currently, as of 2024, only 13 states in the entire country have a law that says no child marriage without any exceptions is ludicrous. And Vilas, like you said, I think it's crazy to me that the lawmakers who make the law don't understand how we're legalizing child marriage in essence, right? So thank you both for sharing that. And I want to direct it now to Vilas. While we were doing research, while Aicha and I were doing research, we found that according to Unchained at Last, nearly 300,000 children were legally married in the US, particularly between 2000 and 2018. And these were mostly girls who were wed to adult men. And some of these children were as young as 10 years old. So can you, Vilas, please talk to us about the main reasons why child marriage occurs in the US and the impact that it has on girls in this country?
I do. No, I want to add on to what Kate was saying. 4 states have 0 age. So yes, there are 37 states left that we have to fight to get to at least the age of adulthood, but 4 of these states have no minimum. And so it's really disturbing when you say 10. The thing is, there are so many reasons that parents decide that this is an acceptable practice. The reasons can be anywhere from religious, whatever their religious organization is, or pregnancy, or child support. There's the story of the guy who got his 16-year-old daughter over summers, and he had shared custody with his ex, her mother, and he was just tired of paying child support, and he found a way out. He paid a guy to marry his daughter, therefore absolving him of his, abdicating him of his responsibilities. The mother found out, and of course, and then went to court to try and annul the marriage and get this underage child back into her custody. And the court said that we can't undo it. And so, I mean, the reasons are ridiculous. I have personally never, ever been given a reason that made me stop to think for a moment, like, okay, interesting. No, there is not a good reason. You are robbing that child of the natural responsibilities of the parent, insurance coverage, child support. These are things that we don't think about, that the parents like, I'm just so done with this teenager. I can't handle it. I'm done. And there should be an avenue for that child to be able to get herself, and I'm not trying to take this away from underage boys that this may happen to, but we're all aware that this is largely a young girl issue. There should be an avenue for that young girl to find support, emancipation, foster care, as broken as that system is, but something that gets them away from these horrible parents like my mother. And I think the fact that the law allows it doesn't allow for that protection for children. There's a lot of things that the law says you cannot do until you're 18, and there are really good reasons for that. It's a lifelong consequence when you put a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 17-year-old into a contract of marriage with a man that requires her to give her body to him. And, I have heard of scenarios where, well, until the girl is, a certain age, or it's usually just puberty. So still could be 10. But they say, okay, we're going to hold the girl over here and not allow her to have sex with this older man until she hits puberty. That's not acceptable. That she doesn't have the right to stand up and say, I'm leaving, I'm walking away, I don't want to have sex. She doesn't have the right. Girls for hundreds of years now have been bred to be the possession of a man at some point. You're going to be a husband and you're going to be a mother. Basically, you're a servant, you're a slave, you are a possession, you're a property. How are we going to get to the other side of this? How are we going to start seeing women as valuable if we can give them away before they have a voice, or take their voice away before they even come into it? How are we surprised at the state of patriarchy that we live in when we don't even allow these girls to turn 18 and make their own decisions and completely autonomously make their own decisions? We don't respect girls, but we expect society to. We don't. Society, the entire world is now coming aware that we take these little girls and give them to a man. Why? It's a human rights abuse. It is child abuse. It is what I call consensual rape. The child didn't consent. The parent consented to my rape. So, it is rape. You have to, Kate, reframe the words. And I feel like when I was younger and I would tell my story, people would be like, oh my God, so much shock value. And I'm like, no, I'm not. This just happened. I'm not trying to shock you. I was raped. I was married at 13. Sorry if you're shocked, but these things happened. And sugarcoating it so that you don't feel so alarmed about it is not the right move. Oh, I was had this religious no, I'm not. There are no excuses for it. There are no ways for me to soften up the fact that I was brutally raped at 13 and 5 months later given to a man who was twice my age to be married to and be raped. What? There's no way to sugarcoat that. And we can't. We need to say the things. We need to say them loud. And I of course I spent a lot of years in shame. But then one day you realize that I'm ashamed of something that my parents did, and I'm ashamed of something that my first husband did. I'm ashamed of other people that have perpetrated this human rights abuse on others, but I'm not ashamed of anything I've done because I didn't do anything. And I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a survivor, which makes it easier, because, you know, I will not be a victim of anything until I die, and then that'll be the thing. But until then, I wake up every day and I'm like, I survived yesterday. So it's important to reframe and be brutally honest. And fortunately, as I was telling Aicha yesterday, as I've gotten involved in this space of being a survivor advocate, I have been treated extremely kindly and gently by all of the different organizations that are doing this work, and it does make me choke up, that I'm like, oh my God, people care, and we're going to fix this. I'm 55 years old, so this happened to me 42 years ago. So for 42 years, I've been sitting here going, yeah, girls don't matter. And of course, I don't believe that. I believe girls matter, but society didn't think I mattered. And I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. And I knew that it was legal. And I was just like, I wonder why nobody cares about this. And then I got pulled into this work, and I was just like, this is amazing. It's cathartic. It's heartwarming to know that so many people out there are fighting to make a better world for little girls like me. And I talk to that little girl all the time, and tell her that, we're going to make it right. We're going to make it right before the last thing that gets us. And we're going to pull her off the side of that mountain that she was raped on, and we're going to change the world so that no one has to suffer the consequences of that by being given away to some other random guy. And I definitely did not bring tissues in my office today. But I'm extremely grateful for everyone that is bringing awareness to this, and I'm disappointed that we have to fight this battle, but I'm here for it, and I'm going to do it. And if I save one little girl from getting married, I'm good. I'm good.
Vilas, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your story, and we really appreciate you being here. I think it's really important to reframe the narrative and not sugarcoat these stories, and really talk about them frankly and honestly. So again, thank you for sharing, and thank you for talking about some of the reasons why child marriage occurs in this country. I think a lot of people aren't aware of the different reasons why, or maybe never think about why. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Can I just add one thing? I'm sorry, I went on a little soapbox there, but you had asked the consequences, right? So I was 13 and I got married, and then when I was about almost 15, he left, and so then I was homeless. And if you're tracking, there was no school anywhere in here. So I did not go to school. I did not graduate from high school. I did not ever get an education. I ended up being homeless on and off until I was about 19 or 20. I did end up back at my parents', which of course they weren't too thrilled about. But the consequences aren't just, oh, and then you were homeless for a little while, which in and of itself is plenty to deal with, but the consequences are lifelong. And these girls don't just wake up one day and go, that's over. I'm I'm gonna be fine. You know, I am fine. I made a life for myself, but there isn't one day ever that goes by where I don't say, I wonder if I could have been a lawyer. I wonder if I could have been a doctor. I wonder if I could have been a, you know, I don't know, something, rather than being raised to think that my job was to be a wife and a mother. And that's not really who I am. I'm my whole individual autonomous person outside of those two things that I have also been in my life. So it's a consequence that I never had the opportunity to be in school, to learn normal society. And you know, I was 16 years old, living on streets in DC, and this gentleman who I had, you know, few far interactions with actual gentlemen during my childhood, but this guy was like, yeah, if you really need somewhere to sleep, you can sleep in my place. And I just sat there in front of the television and I'm like, how do I learn to be normal? How do I learn society? Watch soap operas, watch you know, talk shows, watch sitcoms, watch the new, like what can I do to absorb? How do I become like everybody else? Because I was so weird, I was so strange, and it's a consequence that we can't afford to let little girls have, or little boys. We can't afford to let any of these feel. And the other thing that we need to start talking about is men. Men need to step up, and men need to start giving a voice to this has to stop. We cannot allow, if I hear it, if I see it, if I know about it, I have to stand up. It's all women in this sphere, and I appreciate that, and it's beautiful, and I love the women who are standing up and doing this. However, we need the men to stand up and go, yeah, I'm not going to tolerate, if I hear about it, if I know about it, if I even get a whiff of somebody going, oh, it'd be great to be married to a 13-year-old. No, we need to cut that down. And we need that to start changing the conversation in society, where the perpetrators get called out, because nobody's going to say that to me, but in their own circles, they need to start stepping up.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And thank you for talking about the lifelong consequences and how that impacts girls, for their entire lives. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Kate, I'm going to switch to you a little bit and ask you about filmmaking and what inspired you to use filmmaking as a way to focus on child marriage, and how can creative mediums like documentaries drive policy change and public action?
Yeah, honestly, what inspired me was just rage. Everything that Vilas has been saying and talking about, the consequences, the lack of value of women and girls in society, all of it all together. And then I was working in communications at this group where I was seeing media requests come in, treating child marriage like it would be good reality TV fodder, or even in conversations with people where they're like, well, it's not that bad, right? These kinds of attitudes that really have to change, that even within, different groups of women are heavily internalized and extremely unhealthy. So that really is what got me to leave my job and throw all of my life savings into starting to make a documentary. I don't necessarily recommend, but hey, sometimes it works out at least to help get the word out on some things. And, that's kind of where it started. The way it has evolved, it's both inspiring and horrifying in equal measure. Seeing, like Vilas said, all the incredible advocates who are working to make this change, because it is a life sentence. And what I think people don't understand when they say, oh, a 17-year-old girl, if she gets married, then if she wants to get divorced, it's just a year. I would like to posit to you what a year of rape and emotional and psychological and financial torture, end of your education, end of your hopes and dreams. Tell me day in and day out for a year that isn't a life sentence. So I really am passionate about the fact that it has to end, like child marriage has to end, no exceptions, across the United States and across the world, because we already understand. There have been so many studies done on the horrific consequences for women and girls that do last throughout their lives and have severe impacts on health and on the potential for poverty and so many different aspects throughout their life. This is very, very well documented. So the fact that women and girls are trapped, girls aren't even allowed to bring a marriage petition in their, or I'm sorry, a divorce petition in their own name. They're not allowed to go to a shelter because they're considered a minor and would be returned to their guardian, who is their husband or slash abuser. So it's that rage and that fury, honestly, is really what has like propelled making this film, and also wanting to continue to advocate. And there is more work to do. Yes, 13 states have changed. Yes, there are 4 or 5 Vilas, was it 4 or 5 that don't have a minimum age?
4
that still don't have a minimum age, but even the ones that have changed are under threat. New Hampshire, for example, is talking about introducing a bill to reintroduce child marriage to the state, to reintroduce this horrendous human rights abuse. And Vilas, I agree with you 100%. I have not heard a single argument or defense of child marriage that holds any water whatsoever. It is there are none. That's the simple fact. So I think we need to keep in mind that like these gains are hard fought and they should be celebrated, but they are by no means written in stone, and there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you for that. And I completely agree with you. I think rage and anger could be a powerful motivator to then, fuel our actions and create change. And as I'm sitting here listening to you both, I am learning so much about how there are so many loopholes, even in states that do have the no exception rule. But I wanted to circle back to what you said before, Vilas, about men and how we can call in men and have them also stand as allies and raise their voices against this child abuse and all of this that's happening. And I wanted to ask you, how can we as women and as people who want to protect girls' rights, how can we call in men? What resources exist? How can we involve them in our fight? And how can we make them understand that this isn't just a girl's problem or a woman's problem? They are very much involved in this, and that they also need to be a part of the change.
So we're living in a time right now where a lot of the good men are stepping back a little bit to allow for women's voices and respect. Like, okay, yes, I see it. And I think I know some of these good men. I have 3 sons who are good men, and I have discussed rape with them, and I've said, I didn't know when you were little that I was supposed to say, hey, by the way, don't rape. I didn't know that I needed to say that, and I need to say it now, because apparently we need to say that. Because society has never said this to men. Society has spent hundreds of years telling girls not to get raped. How I can't stop that. It's don't get murdered out there. What? I'll try. That's not it's the wrong audience. No matter what I'm wearing, no matter if I'm covered from head to toe, no matter if I'm walking around naked, the odds are the same. So what we need to do is we need to open these conversations, which are hard to have with men, and say, hey, can you pledge? Can you pledge? So, I mean, I respect that we are trying to call on women's voices and make our voices heard louder. But we also need men in this space because they're going to be in the spaces of rapists. And they're going to be having conversations, and hopefully the things they say, I almost melted into a puddle when my son said, I promise you, I have never, ever, without consent, slept with a girl. I have never, ever. And I've asked and again, and I was like, how did I, thank you. But why is that so wonderful? Why can't we assume that men aren't going to rape? Why can't we assume that? It just devalues these girls and just makes them, ripe for being married off and tossed away. And society doesn't really see the bigger picture. But I do believe that we have to engage men in these conversations. And I think there are a lot of men out there who are willing to stand up, who are willing to fight alongside of us. And I think some of them are a little bit shy, not that's not the right word, but a little bit reserved, saying like, I don't want to talk over, I don't want to mansplain, I don't want to. So they, rightly so, they've had several hundreds of thousands of years to talk, and it is our turn. But I think it's important that we call on them, call them out, and be like, hey, we need you to be aware of this, and we need you to repeat this, and we need you to pledge this, and we need you to see something, say something. I mean, that's not just a terrorist thing, because men are terrorizing women when they're raping and marrying them. So, see something, say something. If you hear one of your buddies talking like this, I need you to step up, and I need you to say something, and I need you to call it off. It's not funny. It's not locker room talk is not funny. It's not okay. And I know plenty of people. I have a friend, we have this like little chat group, and he said, no, actually, that's not how people talk in the locker room. I've been in locker rooms, and that's not. And if anybody ever did speak like that, I'd call them out, because no, that's not okay, and it's not normal. So when guys are like, oh, it's locker room talk, no, it's not. It's you in this isolated situation, and we're going to call it out, and we're going to end it. Go back under that rock that you crawled out from. We will not allow, misogyny and racism and rape culture to be seen here. It's not acceptable.
Thank you. I think the crux of that is just being able to have those open, honest, raw conversations, and also being able to call in people in a way that allows them to understand where they stand, right? And also make room for everyone, right? So thank you for sharing that, Vilas. And Kate, I want to direct it back to you and ask you, what can people living in the US do to help end child marriage, whether it be through creative mediums like filmmaking, like you did, or through other methods of advocacy? What can people do to help end child marriage in this country?
Well, I think one of the first things they can do is what people on here are doing today, which is listen to survivors, listen to the people who have gone through this, listen to the truth and the reality of the situation. Art, film, writing, especially any creative medium, does have a lot of power to reach audiences in different kinds of ways as well. Whether that's art generated by survivors or generated by advocates, it has the power to, I think, reach deeply and like touch little different places of the psyche or inside that might get questions starting to form. And I think it also has the potential to access a wide audience, to get to people who maybe aren't the ones who are listening to this interview right now, or who wouldn't necessarily be inclined to, but maybe come across a film or a piece of art or a piece of writing or a piece of poetry, something that introduces the idea to them. So I think the potential to reach out to people who really need to hear it, I think that's powerful. But I'd say first and foremost, listen to survivors, seek out ways to educate yourself, whether that's through film, whether that's through art or writing. Go to unchainedatlast.org. They have been on the forefront of this issue since the beginning of this movement, and they have an incredible set of resources, both for learning about this issue, but also for ways to act. And they provide life-saving resources for those who are facing or fleeing a forced or child marriage as well. So there's something there for everyone. It really is just a matter of where you want to start. But starting sometimes can be the hardest thing. But I would encourage people to just leap in one way or the other. Pick something that speaks to you, and go and do it, because we need all of you.
Thank you, Kate. And another way that I want to add for people who are just starting to get involved, who maybe they just watched this video and this is the first time that they've ever heard about child marriage in the US, a great way or a great first step would be take the pledge. It's Child Marriage Free World. It's the Global Pledging Week. Take the pledge, scan the QR code found below right now. It takes 2 minutes. You are literally standing in solidarity with so many women and girls across the world by just taking the pledge. So start there. And thank you, Kate, for sharing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So, Vilas, I'm going to turn to you and ask you the same question. What can we do to end child marriage in the U.S.? But also, I want to add, I'm in D.C. I live in D.C. So this is close to me. Can you also tell us more about the D.C. child marriage bill that you've been instrumental with, and why it's so important?
So to tack on to everything that Kate said, and also Kate said, listen, and I just want to say, listen and believe survivors, believe the victims, believe the people that are saying, I had this experience, and honor them. It's something that I have, as I've worked in the DC and child marriage space, I have worked with Unchained at Last and Tahiri and the Person Center and the rape crisis. All of them have been so kind and caring that it's new to me. That amount of care, that's what melts me. That I'm like, oh, there are actual people that care out there. And even Aicha yesterday, there's something you don't want to say, and I was like, no, I'm an open book. And then now, like, but I'm only out there, and in my to the limit that I feel comfortable, and I'm like, no, push past those limits. So I'm working on that for myself, but it is critical to listen and believe people who are having, and this is an interesting thing, because I apologize for turning this a little bit political, but there's something about listening to people saying, hey, I had this experience, and then us going, okay, we believe you, and we're going to honor your rights and your wishes. I don't have to have a daughter that died from not being able to get an abortion in order for me to respect this. And that's the difference. It's like being empathetic enough to be able to go, okay, I don't want anybody to die. I don't want anybody to be, anybody's rights to be taken away. And to be able to get outside of yourself just enough to have compassion for others, for girls, for voices that are not heard, immigrants, minorities, young girls, pregnant girls. We need to listen, and we need to believe those people. I don't have to live through it. I don't have to have walked here from El Salvador to know what it feels like. I can listen. And I thank goodness I don't have to walk here in order to believe them, because I don't want to. I would rather listen to the stories and say, how can I help you? What can I do? How can I support you? And to the DC bill, a dear friend of mine was very active in changing the age in Virginia to 18 with no exception, and asked me to join her in the DC effort. And so we did, alongside of all of the organizations that I mentioned previously, and many others. We all met and went into made appointments with all the council members, and a whole group of us went into their offices, sat down, told the stories, gave the statistics, gave the information, all of the angles, like, here's what's happening and here's why it's not okay. Unchained at last, Becca would say, we all know that you don't magically become an adult when you're 18 years old, but you do magically wake up with a whole bunch of rights that you didn't have the day before. And so each person shared their information, statistics, and the interesting piece that Alex Goyette with Tahiri would say, that what's happening is, as these states have changed to 18, other states are now having to go to DC. So there isn't a requirement to live in DC in order to be married. So they're like, oh, we'll just go to DC, get married, and go back to our state, wherever that is. And so it had increased in DC because all of these people are rushing. Otherwise, they're going to have to go out west because the 13 states are on the East Coast. And then apparently there was like a van full of kids that somebody was trying to marry off in Delaware, and the clerk was like, this feels odd. This doesn't feel right. And so that was a red flag for them. Luckily, somebody was paying attention. But as the states start to make 18 without exception, we're going to get pushed, and it's going to be really hard in some of the states. I'm going to fight it until I die or until we win. So it's going to be a long fight, and it's really challenging. But back to going into these, DC was a very warm and welcoming space for our issue, and every single one of them were just aghast. Wow, what? No, that's insane. No, oh my God, we will fix that right now. So they're doing that right now. And on the 17th of December, they will make their final vote, and we don't believe there will be any opposition. So that'll be a major win, and I'm proud of us. But it's hard. It's interesting that months that it takes a lot of organizations and a lot of people and a lot of showing up and telling the stories and giving them the information and statistics. You know, it feels so weird because why am I saying, hey, so I got violently raped. Can you please make a law that says, no, don't do that? You know, like what? Why do I have to ask for this? It's so bizarre to be saying, can you please make it so that children don't get sold to an old man so that he can have sex with her, please? Do you mind? Like it's so bizarre to me. Like, hey, just look at it on face value right here. Why? Is there any reason at all whatsoever? Marriage is a legal contract. It's a contract. And the reason for I'm gay, and I fought in the let gay people get married space. So doing all these marriage things. I'm very well aware of what marriage is. Marriage provides legal protections for your assets, for your medical contribute, like so that your spouse can be there for your, you know, should you die, you know, there are tax purposes. Why can't we ask these little girls, what value are you getting in this contract by getting married to this guy? Where's the value? Only the man is getting the value. He's getting to have sex with a little girl. That is the only value. What is the girl getting? The girl is now losing the protection of her parents, the legal rights that she has to have insurance and a home and child support, and so she's losing everything. For what? For the privilege of getting raped? What is happening here? So it's definitely something that we need to look at with really brutal eyes. And I don't apologize anymore for the way I say things. I am who I am, and I feel entitled at this point because of my experience. And I'm like, I lived this. Please believe that I know what I'm talking about. There is absolutely zero reason, zero, where a 17-year-old, let's just say 17 because that feels delicate, should be married. There's no reason. Okay, is it because you're in love? Great, you'll still be in love next year, and if not, congratulations, you dodged that. So it's a ridiculous thing. I don't even think kids should be married at 18. I mean, let's be honest, you know, you're not done going to college and figuring out who you want to be. What if you're not even that sexual preference that, you know, like, oh, right, I got married to a man and actually I'm gay. You know, that's horrible. So it's really a bad thing. It's just a contract. Get old enough when you can afford to enter into a contract to purchase a home, or a contract to sign a lease, or a contract to, you know, have a job, employment contract. When you get old enough to understand what this contract is, cool, get married, enter into that contract. But getting married is far bigger than a contract to buy a home or rent a home or get a job. Those things are not, and they should be, you know, we should have the option of renewal in marriage. I mean, marriage is ridiculous. I mean, it's for shared wealth, and it's not. We need to take it away from the religious sphere because it's completely unnecessary. That's not what America is about. It's separation of church and state. Just kidding. America has forgotten that. But I think it's important that we remember that marriage is a contract, and you cannot make a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old honor this contract because mom signed that contract. You sleep with him, mom.
Thank you, Vilas. I mean, you presented so much just good information, right? And specifically, I want to circle back to the part where you talked about empathy. There's this amazing phrase that I like to follow called compassion over comprehension. You don't have to comprehend something to show compassion and have empathy for it. So thank you for all that you've said and all that you're already doing to end child marriage. And I just want to ask Kate, we just have a couple more minutes here left, and I want to ask you, Kate, is there anything else that you would like those watching to know? Also, if you could tell people where they could watch your documentary, the full length of it, that would also be very much appreciated.
Yeah, sure thing. That's a forced marriage story is on a number of different platforms, including Apple TV, Amazon Prime, YouTube documentaries. I think it's still on Tubi. I think the thing that I would just like to say is if you are even remotely either facing a situation like this or you know someone who is, please know that you are not alone and there are a lot of people out there waiting to help you. UnchainedAtlast.org, like I said, fantastic resources. And I think Vilas said it best with listen, believe, honor, and act.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you both so much for joining us today. This was a powerful conversation. I know I learned so much just by sitting here with you guys. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate having this conversation with you. So thank you for join us in taking the pledge to everybody watching. And you can scan the QR code or click the link in our bio. But Vilas, is there anything else that you wanna add before we have to wrap up?
I don't want this to end before, and I mean this in the most loving and not condescending way, but I'm so proud of you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I'm just proud that you guys are taking this on and making it your mission. It's a beautiful thing. And one of the things, and I don't want to go off on another tangent, but one of the things is that a lot of these young girls actually think that they want to get married. And I do have just a bit, give me 1 minute to present that, because let's say a 16-year-old girl says, yeah, I do. I love him so much. Because they've been groomed. They've been set up. And it's a long con, and they're 16. So what do they know? They're easy mark. And so they think they've fallen in love. This man buys them presents or whatever, right? So let's say a 16-year-old who has, your average 16-year-old who has excellent grades, and he's a great student. She, for the sake of this argument, she's a great student. She's straight A. She's a good kid, and does everything that she's supposed to do. And she comes home and she's like, I would like the government to make an exception and allow me to drink alcohol. Like, no, that's not a thing. Okay, well, but I can prove that I'm really good and I'm responsible, and I'm not going to drive. And no, there's a reason. Your brain is not ready for that. So I mean, it has to be, even if a 16 or 17-year-old, yeah, but I'm in love, and this is my life. I want this life, and then they go to a judge and they say, please give me this marriage. This judge should have the same view of, you also don't get to buy alcohol or cigarettes or sign a contract until you're 18. So we need to remember that we're protecting the children even from themselves if they were to say, no, I consent. I hate living at home. My parents are mean. Sure. But no. We have to think about that too, because we want to listen to the voices of girls, but we also want to make sure that we're looking out for them, even if they don't have their best interest at heart.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for that. We really appreciate both of you joining us. This was a really great and compelling conversation. So thank you. Before we sign off, I just want to ask everyone to consider taking the pledge. You can scan the QR code below, or you can click the link in our bio. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to our guests for being here, and we hope to see you at our next live.